Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan Lugo. Thank you so much for tuning in here on Friday, September 20th. The Jaguars taking on the Bills, Monday Night Football, 7:30 p.m. We've got matchups to watch. Now, this is a football game between two teams that are seemingly headed in very different directions. Jaguars 0-2, coming off a very disappointing defeat at the hands of the Browns in their home opener. The Buffalo Bills are 2-0. They just smoked their division rivals, a team that came back against the Jaguars in week one, the Miami Dolphins. So what's really interesting about this is you talk about matchups, and a lot of folks look at this game and they say, well, the Jaguars couldn't beat the Dolphins and the Bills beat the brakes off of them. Like the Bills are just going to crush the Jaguars. That doesn't account for matchups. And I don't really think that's a logical way to look at matchups in the NFL, to look at games in the NFL, to say, hey, this team beat the crap out of that team that beat this team, so this team's going to beat that team. Right? Like, that's not really how it works. It's a week-to-week league, and there are so many different matchups in each individual game that will help determine the outcome. We're going to look at those matchups today. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. You can also check out genjag.com/shop, pick up some new Duval gear like the hat I'm wearing right now. You can become a channel member here on YouTube, help support the channel further. So one thing about this game, matchups wise, any game that the Jaguars are going to be entering until things change a bit, before you even look at the matchups, individual matchups, schematic matchups, you have to say, can the Jaguars offense get out of its own way? So like Jaguars offense versus itself. From a pre-snap communication standpoint, it was not good enough against the Cleveland Browns. From a play calling, play design, and play sequencing, it wasn't good enough. Execution from the offensive line, both in the run game and the passing game, not good enough. Trevor Lawrence, early on in that game, first half, he made too many mistakes himself. Wide receivers, not catching the football all the time, not making the plays that are there to be made. Pre-snap penalties on the offense, right? So the Jaguars offense versus itself, like how can you expect them to win a matchup against a good defense when they can't stop beating themselves? And so until they can do that, I don't really see them being able to beat a team like the Bills. I really don't. Now, can that get cleaned up? Yeah, it absolutely can. And we talked to Press Taylor today, and he talked a little bit about, you have to be out there on the field more. You have to convert on third downs. He didn't really give answers as to how they can convert on third down more, but he did talk about the pre-snap communication from last week, and he said it's really been in the red zone. He says, which is where we always know it. There's an issue because your substitutions are traveling the furthest point they could throughout the course of a game. So this is not an excuse. It may be a valid explanation, but it's not an excuse I've ever really heard before. And the bottom line is it's not good enough and it shouldn't be an issue. And he admitted to that. Like, was asked point blank if these communication issues should still be occurring in year 3 of this offense, of this system. And he said, no, we should be beyond this. So that's an issue. And they've got to get it figured out. Like, you can't be having these communication issues from play caller to quarterback to the rest of the offense getting to the line of scrimmage. There's no reason for that. So Jaguars offense versus itself is the number one matchup, unfortunately. It's ridiculous. I've had to spend 4 minutes talking about it, but I think it is huge. And again, third down, execution at every level, communication, play calling, play sequencing, it's all got to be better. But when you talk about the Jaguars, the actual play of the Jaguars, I think, and this should come as no surprise, the Jaguars offensive line versus the Bills defensive line, I think, is going to be the matchup to watch. Because, look, I think the Jaguars can take advantage of the Bills linebackers. They've got two backups in the game. Yes, they are extremely well coached. I like Dorian Williams coming out of Tulane last year. I think he's a good young football player. They've got another guy who played a lot of reps last week, Spector. I'm sure that they're going to do the best they can, but they're not Matt Milano or Terrell Bernard. They're just not. So I think the Jaguars should be able to take advantages in spots there. I think secondary-wise, the Bills have two good outside corners. Rasul Douglas, a good veteran. Christian Benford playing very well, a young player. At safety, I think, Taylor Rapp, pretty good. Like, not an all-pro, not bottom of the league type of guy. So, this is a team that has some talent collectively on the back end. And again, they're well coached, but I think it really comes down to if the Jaguars can handle the Bills up front offensively. Because I think that Trevor Lawrence can do a good enough job against this secondary and against these linebackers. And I think the backs can as well. Like, you get them one-on-one with one of these linebackers. I think Tank Bigsby, if he's able to go, and obviously Travis Etienne, they're going to be able to get the job done. But, like, Ed Oliver versus the Jaguars' interior offensive line is a matchup you do not like if you're a Jacksonville Jaguar fan. This guy can be a game wrecker on the interior. And you've got Brandon Sheriff, who's looking like a little bit of a shell of himself at this point. You've got Ezra Cleveland's playing pretty well. Mitch Morse is playing pretty well. But these three on the interior need to come together as a collective better than they have the first 2 weeks, in week 3 here against the Buffalo Bills in a hostile environment. It's going to be loud, right? Bills Mafia is going to be getting after it out there. So you can't also say, for whatever reason, the Jaguars have played better on the road to start the year and last year. Maybe that somehow gets them going. Who knows? But Ed Oliver versus the interior of the offensive line is huge. And look, Von Miller is starting to play like the Von Miller you saw before his injury. And that's terrifying. You also have Gregory Rousseau playing very well. They still have AJ Epinesa, who gave the Jaguars tackles fits last year. The Jaguars tackles in pass protection have not been good this year. They've been significantly worse. I do think part of the problem here, this team has been adjusting to not getting the ball off as quickly. Why have they not been getting the ball off as quickly? They've been running a lot more play action. They've been trying to get vertical a lot more with this passing game. That's been requiring the offensive line to protect Trevor Lawrence just a little bit longer at times. But at the same, and you can point to that and certainly say, that's a little bit of an issue. I also think they just haven't been playing as well. Like, it's not always that after 2.5 seconds they get beat. And Trevor Lawrence just had the ball for a little bit too long. Sometimes, like, you've seen Anton Harrison get beat in a flash. You've seen Cam Robinson get beat in a flash. Brandon Sheriff, talking about the interior, get beat in a flash. So pass protection has to be better, not just because the Jaguars are holding onto the football longer, but it hasn't been as good as it was last year, even when you just talk about quick game stuff. They haven't been protecting. They've been getting beat in less than a second at times this year, right? So the entire point of all this is the Jaguars tackles just have to be better. They have to be more prepared. They do not have an easy opponent. And going into this year, Cam Robinson and Anton Harrison, looking at last year when they were on the field together, they handled a lot of good edge rushers together with very little problem. And it wasn't just that the Jaguars were a quick strike offense. That was not it. I think that's part of it, but it's also just you got to execute a little bit better than you're executing down in and down out. If you're these two guys, you absolutely do. I think on both sides, the running game is going to be huge. Both teams have very talented, explosive running backs. James Cook is a really good runner. The Bills have better run blocking, certainly, than the Jaguars do. They have been much better blocking for their runners on the ground than the Jaguars have. But the Jaguars have a really strong run defense. And I think it's so key because so many teams throughout the league right now are focusing more on the running game than they ever have, Jaguars and Bills included. And so whichever team can kind of force some third and longs, can force the other team out of their comfort zone a little bit is going to have some advantages in this game. I have no question about that. So the Jaguars linebackers, Devin Lloyd and Foye Oluokun, have been tremendous against the run. I think Devon Hamilton's been a little up and down. Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker are doing a pretty good job. And when you have that nucleus, that's going to help you slow down James Cook better than what the Dolphins did. The Jaguars were gashing the Dolphins until the fourth quarter, until the end of the game, right? They were, until they got super predictable and unbalanced on offense. The Jaguars were gashing the Dolphins just as the Bills were last week. And so I think the Jaguars have a very well-coached defense. I think they have the talent to slow down the run against the Buffalo Bills and force it to be a Josh Allen 35 pass attempt game type of deal. But in order to do that, you got to stop the run, and you have to stop it on first and second down and put them in some situations where they've got to push the ball down the field. And Josh Allen doesn't have Stephon Diggs or Gabe Davis anymore. He has guys that operate from the slot more, right? Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid. I think the Jaguars are well equipped to match up with those types of players. And obviously Keon Coleman's going to be out there, a guy that I'm a huge fan of. But at this point in his young career, he's not the focal point of this offense. I think Buster Brown, Ronald Darby, these guys are going to be fine out there against the Bills' outside receivers. I think coverage-wise, the safeties can do a good job as well. So I really think it's going to come down to, for the Jaguars defense, can they slow down the run? And if they can, they're going to have a good shot at holding the Bills to less points than they've scored in the first two matchups of their season. Brian Thomas Jr. versus Christian Benford is my final matchup here. I love this one just because both guys are playing so good. Brian Thomas Jr. needs to get the football more. Jaguars need to figure that out. The Bills are going to play a lot of cover 2, a lot of cover 3. Trevor Lawrence traditionally has been better against this type of defense that isn't super complicated, that isn't super different down to down. A lot of it is what you see is what you get. Now, they execute at a high level. They definitely do. They've got good players that are well coached, operating a simple scheme. They've got a really good defensive front. But I think Brian Thomas Jr. versus Christian Benford is good on good. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is better. And I think that if they're able to scheme up some looks that make sense against cover 2 and cover 3, Brian Thomas Jr. should have a very big game. And he's had big games the first 2 weeks, even with limited targets. He's had high-impact games. So I want to see that continue in week 3 and him to be targeted even more versus this football team. One more matchup, I said that was going to be it, but I think Christian Kirk as a slot receiver going up against this Bills defense that is going to be without their starting slot corner, Teron Johnson, who's one of their best football players, that could be an area to watch as well. So that's going to do it for my matchups to watch. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. Let me know your top matchups you're going to be tuning in to watch Jaguars versus Bills Monday night. If you enjoy the content here, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. You can also check out genjag.com/shop. Pick up some new Duval gear like the hat I'm wearing right now. Become a channel member here on YouTube. Y'all have a good one.